Hey, this is James Arnold Taylor, voice actor, the voice of
Yabba Dabba Doo, Fred Flintstone.
Johnny Test, who's 11 years old and totally awesome.
Ratchet from Ratchet and Clank, Tidus from Final Fantasy X. Oh, yes, and of course, Obi-Wan Kenobi. It wouldn't be Coffee with Kenobi without yours truly. The Force is strong here indeed.
What does the Jedi Council want?
I am not here on behalf of the Council. You are serving a life sentence for crimes against the Republic. But at your trial, you accused the Jedi of murder and treason.
The lessons you learn from the Jedi greatly limit your power. But I will help you overcome this weakness. I must confess, you've impressed us. You both have. Unfortunately, there is only room in our ranks for one. Now it is time you meet your new master.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. I am your host, Dan Zehr, delighted to talk Star Wars with you. Ever since May of 2013, the purpose of the show is to provide a positive, family-friendly, spoiler-free place to discuss this galaxy far, far away. If you will imagine walking into your favorite coffee shop and hearing a discussion of Star Wars films, Disney Plus live action, animation, books, comics, collectibles, or Star Wars experiences at the Disney theme parks. I want to share that experience here on this podcast, weekly interactive live video every Tuesday night, my website, special events, email newsletter, and more. Find out more and join our Star Wars community at coffeewithkenobi.com. Thank you to the official travel partner of CWK, MEI, and MouseFan Travel. Check out coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel for a no-cost, no-obligation quote, and let them know Coffee with Kenobi and Dan Zehr sent you. And while you're on MouseFan Travel's website, be sure to go to coffeewithkenobi.com/DisneyWish to sign up for or find out more information about our amazing trip on the Disney Wish next June 16th to the 20th. You're invited to join me as we tour the galaxy and start on the Disney Wish. Again, find out more at coffeewithkenobi.com/DisneyWish. On today's show, Tom Gross and Brian DeSutter join me as we talk about the 4th episode of Tales of the Empire, Devoted. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi. Well, we've talked about the Morgan Elsbeth arc in Star Wars Tales of the Empire, so now we're going to switch gears and talk about Barriss Offee, and this is much more Clone Wars era centric, but it's a classic. I feel like these episodes are instant classics, so you got to bring an instant classic guest that you know are going to help you understand and learn more about the story, and only the way these two can do it. So first, returning guest, everybody's favorite Ewok Jedi, Tom Gross.
Ewok Jedi.
I don't know why.
Hello.
Yeah, I just thought it would be fun. I tried to throw crazy things your way because you usually handle them pretty well.
Yes. Well, good to be here. This is awesome. Back to be on the podcast that we were looking for. I'm here.
Also joining us, he is a returning guest, but it has been far too long since we have heard the dulcet tones of my friend and yours, Brian DeSutter. Brian, welcome back to Coffee with Kenobi.
Thanks for having me. I don't know about dulcet tones, but I appreciate being back, and I'm glad to be a returning guest.
Well, we are glad to have you. Now, this is going to be a fun one, just like with the Morgan Elsbeth arc. I feel like narratively and structurally, these work together with the first one by itself, and then parts 2 and 3, which will combine next week into its own show. So we're going to talk about the first episode. It's episode 4 of Tales of the Empire, and it is called Devoted. And this is, of course, all about Barriss Offee. Barriss Offee famously is who framed Ahsoka Tano for murder, and which almost led to her being kicked out of the Jedi Order. And ultimately, she chose to leave because of how things had happened. And you know that story already. But what we don't know is what happened to Barriss. Barriss, at the end of that episode, famously said that she didn't believe in the Jedi anymore, and that the Jedi were fighting for evil. And she became disillusioned with them. And as a result, as we find out, she's serving life in prison in the Republic. But then something happens. It's called Order 66 and the rise of the Galactic Empire. So we've got a lot to talk about. So we'll do what we always do. Tom, give me one word to describe the episode and overall thoughts.
Oh, there's lots of words I could actually choose here, but I'm going to go with dark. That'll come into play later on because it's figurative and alliterative. So general impressions of this, just like just like all of these tales, it's the little snippets of story that we don't know, but we know has to happen somewhere. And so these are the stories. And I have to say, it was a surprise to me that it was Barriss that we were going to hear about. I think, at one point you and I had shared just a little bit right after this had come out that, it didn't that it's Barriss didn't feel like Empire. I was so hung up on, this isn't Empire, this is Clone Wars. But this is the transition. And that's kind of what's cool about this one is the transition feel of it from Clone Wars characters that we know to now Imperial influence. And so it takes a little bit of time. And I want to say, as an aside, I'm looking at my notes here, typed them digitally, and Ophi turned into coffee. I think that was
my subliminal messages have been working.
That's right. So yeah, I think it's really cool to see this transitionary period for the Empire.
I very much agree. Brian, what about you? What would be one word to describe Devoted and overall thoughts on the episode?
So I went with confusion. And that's because as I watched the episode, I felt like there was confusion for her as to kind of maybe what was going on. There was confusion as to what was expected of her once she is released. Does she really, she's confused, like, do I fight this Sith guy? He's telling me I'm supposed to attack, and then confusion at the end when she is ultimately paired up with her former friend, like, hey, am I really going to do this? And so that was kind of the theme for me that kept coming back.
Excellent. And confusion is great because she very much lives in that, right? For this first episode. My word for Devoted is impactful. I love this episode. When I was fortunate to see all 6 of these a little bit in advance, and this one stood out to me. Oh, well, the last one as well, but this one stood out to me for having an impact on the overall story. The thing I talk about pretty regularly is that whatever story you're going to tell, it has to matter. It has to be important. It has to teach me something about Star Wars. It has to be something that is character driven. This is character driven. This is about a woman who suddenly, she's in a cell for crimes that no longer matter, that actually would be celebrated with the new regime named Sheev Palpatine. And now suddenly she's like, by the way, the Jedi don't exist. Everything that you were fighting against, that doesn't matter. But now you are going to fight, and you're going to fight to death. And it includes killing friends too. And that's a stunner, right? That's impactful. And I feel like this is a story that I didn't know how much I needed to be told, but now that I've heard it and that I've seen it and experienced it, I'm glad that I did. So let's go ahead and name things that are maybe already, speaking of my word, or that are impactful or that stand out to you about this episode. Tom, why don't you kick it off for us?
Yeah, right at the beginning when Barriss looks out the window and sees the attack upon the Jedi temple, and the clone saying, just be glad you're not a Jedi anymore, blah, blah, blah. Well, then Lynn, who doesn't go by that name anymore, comes in. And she says something that's really impactful to me. And it's nothing new. It just continues the narrative. And that is when she tells the story of how the Jedi tried to assassinate the Chancellor and how the Jedi were corrupt, and confirms for Barriss that what you thought was true. And I just think it's to make it believable to where we get in A New Hope and Empire and Jedi. We have to really understand how that change happened and where the galaxy got to be under the fist of the Empire and Vader and all of that. And so how do we get there? We get there through lies, and lies that are continually told over and over and over, from the rebels to Andor to Solo, and stories like this. Many of the books of this time period retell that narrative of lies, to the point where how does the galaxy believe anything other at this point? Because the Empire largely controls the media, unless Ezra gets on or something like that. And so these lies continue to go. This is something we'll continue to talk about, but I'll just leave it here. And that is, I'm just not convinced that Barriss believes it, but I'm going to stop there. And I'll talk about that later if we don't pick up on that.
I think we will, because I think that's a thread that goes through this. What does she believe? She's devoted, right? Or is she devoted, right? What is she devoted to? What do they want her to be devoted to? And how do you know where to stand when the world keeps pulling the rug out from underneath you? Which is pretty interesting. Brian, what's something that kind of jumps out to you right away, or through anything in this entire episode, that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I agree with Tom. The first thing, I liked the opening shot with you could hear the screaming in the background, and it closed up on her face, and you can see, again, kind of going back to my word, like confusion. She's like, what really is happening? And then one of the first questions she asks is, she's like, like Tom was saying to Lynn, she's like, what empire are we serving? And there's that, again, confusion, like, I don't fully understand what's going on here. And so she's just trying to get a grasp of, her surroundings, what's changed in the world since she's been imprisoned.
And you get this great notice too, that she's so used to following someone who is in charge that she doesn't really quite question it. I mean, she really doesn't. I mean, the only time she ever questioned authority, she ends up in prison for life. Now she did cause, she used the catalyst of that because she frames her friend for murder. But then she finds herself in this new situation. And so that leads me to my first one I want to talk about just having the Grand Inquisitor there. Jason Isaacs returns as the voice of the Grand Inquisitor, and he is, transcendent in this role. The Grand Inquisitor is interesting. He's far more powerful than any Inquisitor, but he's so inferior power level to Darth Vader. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that he brings them to the Inquisitorius, which is their base, which we get to see it a lot in the live action Disney Plus series Kenobi, which was super cool. I like seeing that connective tissue right there. But at the beginning, when we see Barriss, as both of you have already alluded to, there's a close-up of her face, which is, signals to us as an audience that it's introspective. And she's breathing heavy, and she's having like this almost like a panic attack. She's incredibly strong in the Force. So my guess is she's sensing all these Jedi being killed in this massive seismic shift in the power struggle of light versus dark. And it's all darkness now. And she's in darkness. She's in a dark cell. Tommy, you mentioned shadows before. And then when the thing that stood out to me is that when the Inquisitor trains her, and she holds back, and he says, and he keeps trying to get her, use your hate, use your anger, which is a trope we've heard very often with the dark side of the Force. And it just stands out to me as just anytime we get to see, like with Delilah S. Dawson's Red Blade book, where we get to see much more background on the Inquisitor program itself, and seeing how they have to fight one another for basically status within, or to actually be allowed to be in the Inquisitor group, is interesting, because ultimately she's forced to fight her friend who she doesn't want to. And I just think it again shows the tragedy, and the evil that is the Empire, which isn't new, but to see it through this lens, I found it really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that stood out to me in that is how, first of all, that little fight that he goads her into, gives her the lightsaber, and he just dodges. That reminds me of another fight. Was it in Kenobi with Reva and Vader, where Vader just sort of uses the Force to keep, like, he doesn't have a weapon. He uses the Force to kind of keep her off, and it was an amazing battle. And this just was sort of reminiscent of that, the way he does that. But he just continues to poke at her and poke at her and poke at her to where she brings out the hate. It's what the Emperor tries to do to Luke on the Death Star and Jedi. Tries to just get him angry and get him frustrated. And
he hits her in the face, right? That's like kind of stuns her. And you see blood, which you're not used to seeing in animation.
Oh, yeah. Especially when the blood drips onto the floor and then she looks up and she just blasts him against the wall, causing him to have blood. He has a different reaction, though, because he knows he's won. So, yeah, I'm with you. That was a really meaningful moment to this. I have a few observations that kind of go along with the things you said. So the Inquisitorius, is that the name of the it's under construction, which I thought was cool. When they flew to it, I was like, is that what I think it is? And then you see up in the tops little sparks and scaffolding and everything. You're like, oh man, that's cool. We're seeing that before it's finished. That, and then what was the other observation? Oh, I guess I already talked about it, the Vader and Reva. So, but then I think that battle between the training that goes between the Inquisitor and Barriss ties right into that fight that you were talking about with her friend, Dante.
Yes, Dante. What perfect name.
Yes, exactly. Where she starts by trying to, hey, we don't have to do this. Which goes back to my initial observation earlier. I'm not where I wasn't convinced that she has bought in. I'm still not convinced that she's bought in here. What Barriss is, to me, what Barriss is living through is survival. She knows I can die or I can play their game. And whether it's premeditated, whether it's just survival instinct or what, she tries to convince Dante that this isn't the way, and really she doesn't take a super aggressive action until he pushes her up against the wall, that closing in circle of energy that's burning the floor. And when she bounces against that, it's almost like the Inquisitor drawing blood.
Yep.
She realizes the direness of this and pushes him into the hole.
Was that the next part you wanted to make, or is there something else that you were wanted to bring up as well?
No, I'll use that as my next one because
it's a good one.
I was gonna go to that fight between her and Dante, so that worked out well.
Excellent, Brian. What's the next thing you'd like to talk about?
So when I can't remember the guy, the one guy who is like, "Hey, I want to go off, and I'm going to leave you guys here." What was his name?
Amon.
Yes.
Okay. And so, kind of like what you guys were saying with the Empire, there isn't a whole lot of regard for each other here. He's like, hey, I'm going to do what I need to do. I don't really care, so much to the point they're like, well, what happens to us when they find out you're not here? And he's like, it's not my problem. And then you flash forward to the next scene basically, and they're like, well, what happened to him? And they're like, he was dealt with. And I'm like, there was no surprise for me that, that was foreshadowed, hey, he's going to die for sure. There's no shot this guy is making it out of here alive. And then Dante even says, well, I told him not to go. I tried to warn him not to do this, but he didn't listen. And so the whole disregard kind of for each other, for their feelings, for, even listening to pretty sound advice, like, hey, you shouldn't have tried to escape. We knew you were going to die if you did that. And so just no care for each other, really, or regard.
Or for life.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. Absolutely. And that kind of leads into my next one. My next one is about freedom and how Barris does not have freedom, because her problems with the Jedi was that they were controlling and they were working with an evil organization, which again, ironically, is completely true. But the way she went about doing it, of course, was completely the worst thing you do. It was evil, right? It was evil. It could have led to someone's death, including, Ahsoka, her friend. But in all of this, whether it's with Dante or with the Inquisitor himself or with the final, or even at the beginning when her friend, who doesn't want to be called by her birth name because she's now one of the sisters. I think she the what's number
Fourth.
Sister? Fourth sister. Yeah, that's right. Every time they ask Barris to make a choice, it's strongly suggested, not even implied, that okay, you don't have to, but you'll be killed. She doesn't try to fight it as far as like vocally. She doesn't try to say whatever. She just goes along with it, and she fights back because she is a survivor, like you both had mentioned, and she is someone who will that basic sense of self-preservation. This is not a person steeped in self-loathing, which seems to be sort of a prerequisite to being evil in the Star Wars universe, and sometimes in our in the real world as well. But she is someone who's trying to survive. I don't even think she's trying to look for her country so she knows what flag to wave. She just wants to find answers, but she does it in almost a patient way. Like, I never sense with Barris any kind of desperation. It's more like, I have to do this to survive. If she has scruples, they exist because she doesn't seem to. It's not like she's Loki or the Joker. Like, she's not an agent of chaos by any stretch of the imagination. But the entire thing the Inquisitor says that the Empire always talks about is basically, the Empire exists to create order, because we need order in the galaxy because there's so much chaos. But they don't mean order. They mean control. They mean usurping and taking away your freedoms. This isn't creating order, making Barris do these things. This is the definition of chaos. If you don't do what we say, you will be murdered. That's not order. That's disturbing, is what that is. So I keep thinking of Barris's plight. That, well, she doesn't outright say it here. There's this underpinning of survival. Doesn't necessarily mean I get my freedom, but I can at least plan out what's going to happen the next day in my life. And that's almost as far as she looks, which is very sad. It makes Barris, I appreciated Barris, but then I thought, well, this is just a random character that it betrayed Ahsoka, and okay, I can see that. I don't know what else they would have done. But then she kind of went out of my mind. Like, I was aware that she existed in the lore, but this episode devoted made me actually appreciate her and look at her as a tragic figure in Star Wars, which I find to be much more interesting anyway.
Yeah, to build off of that, you said some things that really kind of made my brain think here for a second. The one is that she never showed any sort of desperation. And I would agree with that. And so when I go to my word of dark, I could have said darkness because that would fit really well here, is as the darkness kind of encompasses her, starts surrounding her, and like the energy field closing in on her, she does seem to keep her composure. The one spot that you could really see it was when she's in the room and it's Amar. Sorry, I said Amon, but it's Amar. When she's in the room with Amar and Dante, kind of the holding room, and they're discussing, do we stay? Do we run? She's sitting on that bench, and she even goes so far as to close her eyes, take a deep breath, and do a little meditative mindfulness right there. And so you can see that she's remembering her lessons from the Jedi, to stay cool and calm in these situations. And as I mentioned earlier, She starts the training with the Inquisitor that way. She starts her fight with Dante that way. And so we even see it and so this is where the ultimate darkness comes. I'm just gonna bring out the elephant in the room right
Please.
now. We're gonna talk about it.
Yeah.
And that is where she's standing there in armor with their helmet in her hand. And the Inquisitor turns and says, "Brothers and sisters, enter." Here's where I looked at this scene in so many different moments, and I was like, the darkness is heavy here. It's a dark room. I think there are windows, and even those windows are dark.
Are they underwater, right?
Everybody's cloaked in black. Even that really cool looking dude with the huge Imperial insignia on the side of his cape on his shoulder with that cool mask.
From Tales of the Jedi, that's who Ahsoka defeats in the last episode.
Oh, yeah. How cool. Anyway, she keeps her cool through all of this. Even when he says, "You will now meet your master." And the Inquisitor kneels at this, which, shows that there is a respect here. And I suspected there's a minute where I was like, is it going to be Grand Moff Tarkin? And then I was like, can't be Vader. Can't be Vader. Oh, it is Vader. And so when we hear Vader first make that breath, I'm imagining across the world, most of us are like, oh, like that just deep breath. She's cool. She's cool. She does what all of the rest of us would do if we didn't know Vader. And this is the first time she looks over her shoulder. She takes a peek over her shoulder to what is this that's entering? And man, what a grand entrance. I wrote down on my notes, not a word was needed because he is darkness. He is darkness. And it has flowed into this room. He walks by with his fists clenched. And he walks up to the throne and he sits down. I mean, that's Star Wars Darth Vader. Mm-hmm. And that's the Darth Vader I need here, again, to be able to buy it in A New Hope. Because it's because of time and things that we can't control in the story. He's not quite as menacing as an adult, but these impressions that we get from Andor and Rogue One and stories like this, I understand the threat that Vader brings. And so back to Barriss, she handles all of this with grace. And the very last line of the show, I'm putting my money on it. She doesn't buy it. She's just surviving. Long live the Empire. That was not with enthusiasm whatsoever.
Well, you said a lot of rich things there too that I'm excited to comment on. But Brian, you had some great expressions when Tom was talking. What would you like to say about Vader's appearance at the end?
So, Tom, unlike you, I did not question who was coming into the room. I wrote down in my notes, I was like, I knew Vader was coming, and it was still an awesome entrance, even though I knew it was going to be him. Because I was just like, and she's like, the guy said, bow before your new master. And I'm like, well, that's got to be Vader. Like, just no doubt for me there. And when he just strides into the room, but again, kind of like what you said, that, hey, she doesn't know who this is. There's confusion. Who is this guy? She turns around and looks. And so, going back to my theme of confusion again, it's still there. At the end, when she says, long live the Empire, still confused. Like you guys said, her heart's not in that. You can tell she's not fully bought into this. And so she's still struggling with what's going on around her. She's still confused. And I think it's very overwhelming to her, as it would be to anybody in this situation. Like, she's been thrown into. I wrote down in my notes, like, at this point, I really think the thought going through her head is what did I get myself into here? I said, yes, I'll take this opportunity, but it wasn't, Dan, like you said, throughout. Okay, you can do this, but your other choice is death. So, she really doesn't have a choice in the matter. She's just surviving, as you guys both said. She is, hey, okay, to get to the next point, this is what I have to do. And yep, I'm going to go ahead and do those things. she's totally in survival mode, and just trying to stay alive at this point.
And what I love so much about this, to build upon the things both of you said so beautifully, is that she reminds me of, she's just in stasis, right? She's like in between, she's not the caterpillar, she's not the butterfly, she's like in her cocoon, because there's not a lot of defiance there, there's a lot of uncertainty, but because she is a survivor, she's able to blend in. And I love what they do visually here. She's given this mask and she doesn't put it on until she says, "Long live the Empire." Only through the mask, only through this pretend thing where you see the world artificially, can she embrace the mantra that is "Long live the Empire." Because again, at this point, she still doesn't even know what that means, except that she had to kill her friend to get to this point, which did not appear to give her any sort of sense of anguish at all. But I really like the use of the mask as a wonderful metaphor of, with the mask on, I can be a part of this evil regime, because a mask is like pretend, or it's like a hiding.
It's
but
not me.
I'm not convinced that she's hiding from herself, though. I don't think that she is. I think she's trying to see what the Empire is trying to give her. I think she's still sort of open-minded about it, but not with any sort of sense of enthusiasm. And as far as the Vader entrance goes, yes, there is no, while she looks over and it says she hears the breathing, she doesn't look scared, but I think she is, again, I think she is aware, because as you said, Tom, Vader's presence, if you sense the Force, it would have been cool if, like, her breath, you could see her breath or something. That would have been awesome. Or if she kind of shivered, because he brings so much, because the dark side is cold. We know this from the films. We know this from Yoda and Luke and other things in Star Wars that we have seen repeatedly. So there's a coldness there. And the fact that the scene takes place underwater is so much better, because a baptism, a change, a growth, a metamorphosis, that's rare. If you're underwater, it's not for a long time, because you're dead, right? Because you can't, unless you're a fish, unless you have gills, you're not going to be able to survive. So they're underwater in stasis, well beneath the surface of this planet, because there is no growth. There's no rising out of the water to change and be renewed, because she is stuck in this stasis place. And she will be, as long as she survives to be an Inquisitor.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah. I mean, how much, geez, I don't know what else to say to that. Other than, I'm just going to say a few things about Darth Vader, because
please,
he's Darth Vader. I mean, okay, he sits down on the throne and they give you that profile picture.
So
I think I have trading cards with that profile. It is so classic that it brought me right back and made me connect to everything I knew about Darth Vader. And just the gaze. You don't need to see through his mask. You don't need to see his eyes. It's the gaze. So some things I was thinking about at that moment were, it wasn't too long ago in history that he was investigating, that Anakin was investigating Barriss. And here she kneels before him, which I couldn't help but think about that, that irony. And then the other thing that led me to think about these things. They chose Barriss because of her, her public beliefs about the Jedi and where the Order stood. Where do these other Inquisitors? This is a long conversation too that we've been talking about since Rebels and the Inquisitors first came about. But where did they pick up the rest of these Inquisitors? Like, Dante and Amar. I mean, she was friends with them somewhere, in Jedi Academy or something like that. And so why them? Did they all also have question? How did they survive? How did they survive Order 66? She was in prison and had written off the Jedi. And so, the clones were not compelled to kill her. So how did these other Inquisitors, how did Lynn, the fourth sister? All of those questions came rolling back into my head, because I remember having the conversations during Rebels. Are these really Force users? They have these trickster lightsabers that are kind of cheaters. And so are they really Force? But I mean, I think we're seeing now they most definitely are. At least some of them are.
They all are.
And so
they're just not. No single Inquisitor is strong enough to take on a Jedi one-on-one. They couldn't do it. But with those enhanced weapons, they're able to be a match, or at least something that, if you recall in season 2 of Rebels, when Ahsoka takes on multiple Inquisitors at once, it's a joke to her, because she is a fully trained Jedi Knight, and they're like, it's like when you're playing basketball and you lower the hoop to 4 feet, right? That's what it is for her. But if you're
the hoop to 4 feet,
well, short people. But there's like they all are strong in the Force, but they weren't able to be a Jedi. They either Jedi didn't pass the trials, they were outcasts, they didn't actually make it to the Academy. If you get a chance, read Delilah S. Dawson's Rise of the Red Blade. It gives you like a full background of the Inquisitor program and how different people become a part of that. Have you read that?
No, I'm looking at it
It's
sitting
good.
over my bookshelf, waving at me now. It heard you.
It should wave at you for the summertime, buddy. You'll love it.
Slid out just a little bit from all the others when you said that. So,
oh, wow.
Yes,
Wow.
it moves its way off the shelf.
The Wi-Fi augments the Force. That's good.
I know. That's cool.
Yeah. So that's good. The only other thing I want to say about Vader is that he never disappoints. Like, I still think less Vader is more, but I love the fact that he doesn't say anything. He doesn't fight. He doesn't turn his lightsaber. And in Rise of the Red Blade, when Vader shows up, he's the final test, and he fights all the Inquisitors. And if they can survive him, then they still get to be Inquisitors. And I thought that's what we were going to see. We didn't see that. And I'm glad we didn't, because I think that it sort of punctuates where she's at right now anyway, and where we are at, wondering what's going to be next. But that mask is on.
I thought it was cool that she was the last, they say bow to your new master, that she is the last one that bows, because they have all bought in. And again, like you guys said, she is not yet bought in. The other thing that stood out to me, and this goes back to the duel with Dante, when she does hit that, the Force or the electric wall or whatever it was behind her.
Yeah.
I was shocked that she used the Force choke.
Yeah.
Because that, to me, number one would probably be lightning as far as dark, powers, Sith power. But the Force choke is like, okay, this is definitely the dark side of the Force. No Jedi does the Force choke. And so that really kind of took me by surprise that she chose to use that particular thing, and then just chucks him down the hole. And so those two things stood out, that she's the last to bow, and then that she, for at least that moment, kind of embraces the dark side.
Well, so that's an interesting thing, right? Because Luke does use a Force choke against a Gamorrean guard in Return of the Jedi, very, very briefly, which has always been sort of a hot conversation that's never been fully answered. And to me, just sort of story-wise, it was probably just George showing, hey, Luke's strong in the Force. I don't know that it was actually ascribed to be a dark side ability, or one that you would think to use. But the interesting thing about the Force choke is that it's more personal, I think, than Force lightning. It's almost like, an up-close punch versus a distance weapon, like to speak Dungeons and Dragons language, I guess. But that part to me is the most haunting thing, because she has to survive, and she strangles him to death and throws him into the pit. Because I think it's either, at this point, it's like her or him. But it's still something that leaves a mark on her psyche that I think shows clearly, well, she's not squeaky clean here. I mean, there's some blood stains that need to be answered for.
Yeah. Going back to the fight with the Inquisitor too.
Yeah.
When he says, right after you said that she gets bloody, he goes, "Oh, well, maybe you weren't as powerful as we," and then, she smacks him into the wall. And I just like the shock of that too, that, she's like, "No, I am who you thought, and I am as powerful as what you thought I was. So
Yeah. It's like when she has to prove herself, she does, but she's not chesty about it. She's not boasting. You know what I mean? She's just like, boom. Right?
Yeah.
I don't ever get a sense that she wants to or needs to prove herself, but she's just so interesting because she's so subdued. Like there's anger there to tap into that, but I don't sense rage. It's sort of weird, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I feel like she was like this as a Jedi, though. I mean,
Yeah.
she was pretty passionate about, what she did with this, calling out the Jedi and that kind of thing. But I never felt like she was, like someone who's going to stand on top of a soapbox and scream out loud and share emotional that way. It was always, I always felt like she was always very reserved and calm. Now, again, is her paddle or her master was Luminar
Unduli.
Unduli, who also was very passive and kind of quiet.
Stoic, yeah.
A fierce warrior, but at the same time not super emotional outward. So no, I guess my final thoughts on Barriss are that I think she was a really interesting character to choose to tell the story on the storytelling side. But then when you're inside the story, the fact that the Empire chose her, I think it's really meaningful for many of those reasons that we talked about. Even they didn't choose her because she has a connection to Anakin, but I think story-wise, I think it's interesting that happens. And so no, I have to say I was really surprised to see a story about this character, but I really wanted to see a story about Inquisitors. So it was a really neat kind of combo that they put together. One other thing is the animation. We talk about this so much on these programs, but I think my favorite animation is the animation of Lynn's, the fourth sister's face. There's something very kind of plastic about her, but the animation just makes her look
expressive.
Yes. And so I thought, and I don't mean plastic in a negative way, by the way.
No, I know what you mean.
I think it's very like impersonal.
Like a mask.
Yes, exactly. And so I thought that was really well done for that character.
I love that. And I completely agree. Brian, anything else you want to talk about as we wrap up the conversation?
I don't really think I had anything else in my notes. Speaking of masks, one question I did have for you guys, since your Star Wars knowledge far surpasses mine. The helmet that they did give to Barriss, does that have any particular significance? Is it a particular, does a certain troop type get that, or is it just a helmet?
It almost looks like there's nothing lore wise that I think makes that mask significant that I am aware of or that I can think of. It certainly looks like a classic Arthurian piece of armor, but no, it's just it's like a battle. And there's the other brother that ends up getting killed in the season 2 finale of Star Wars Rebels by Maul. So that's the same Inquisitor, but it's not the same helmet. So I think it's almost like that's their brand for that. It's a good question.
Individual,
because I thought about that too. Is there something significant about the armor? But I don't think so.
To me, it was very reminiscent of the agents in Bad Batch season 3 that chased them down, like the special agents. But I know there's no connection, but that's what it reminded me of.
No, that's a good call. Well, why don't we give letter grades and final thoughts on the episode? Brian, why don't you start us off? What's your letter grade and for the episode and last minute thoughts on it?
After first watch, I was going to give it a B+, but after my second watch, I'm going to go ahead and bring it up to an A-. Well, I'm going to give it a 92.
Okay.
I'm going to go specific. Yeah, teacher, give it a number grade to go along with the letter grade.
So why? Tell us how you fill out your rubric. Why an A-?
Just a couple of things, like that I missed out on in the first time through. And, as I watched it the second time, I was like, and I don't know that I could, nailed anything specific down, but there was just little thing here, little thing there that I was like, oh, okay, all right. I didn't see that the first time through. And anytime you bring Vader into a show, I mean, man, that really elevates it. And you kind of have to, that's almost worth 5 percentage points right there is, Vader appeared in the episode. Boom, bump it up.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think it's like extra credit. Star Wars extra credit put in Darth Vader.
How do we save this episode? Put Vader in it. All right,
yep.
Boom. Okay, there we go. We got it. Nailed it.
I think that's great. Tom, what about you? Letter grade and any last minute reflections?
I have no faults with this episode. I give it an A. So my final thoughts to this are, it's funny. It's a 17-minute show, and yet there's still so much to read in between the lines with about what people are thinking, the motivations behind the actions, even the space between each scene. Things happen. And so there's a lot of stuff for us to still fill in, even though it's a super short episode. And so all of that, the surprise that it's Barriss Offee and how it begins from the literal Order 66 day to where it ends, she's transitioning into an Imperial Inquisitor, all of that. And then, like you said, Brian, Vader's in it. But so, what made me think, Dan, you said, less Vader is more Vader. Which is why initially I was like, okay, it can't be Vader. So who is this going to be that's their new master? And for some reason, I was like, it's going to be an Imperial someone or other of high ranking that would be like next to Vader, which is why Tarkin came to mind. But boy, was I happy still when he walked in. Who wouldn't be? Well, I mean, I guess if you're against him, you wouldn't want that, but what fan wouldn't want Vader to come walking in the way in which he does? And so, like, what this one makes me want to do, knowing that there's 2 episodes left, is what's next? Like, what would be crazy is if this was it. This is the end of the story, and they don't
that
come.
Would be interesting. Have you not seen the other 2?
Pardon?
Have you seen the other 2 episodes yet?
I have.
Okay.
I have, but that did cross my mind when I was watching. I was like, are they going to drop this? Are they going to like make us hang on a cliffhanger about what that Barriss Offee becomes an Inquisitor, and now all the conversations of which Inquisitor is she, and does she fight Kanan and all that kind of stuff, which obviously the other 2 episodes answer, but
right.
But I look forward to those conversations and seeing what you guys have to say there.
Likewise, I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm going to give this one an A as well. I think it's a wonderful episode. I think it's very character driven and very subtle in the nuance of how it tells the story. It does show don't tell in a very strong, subtle way that emphasize the challenge, but also emphasize the fact that for all of what Barriss is and what she might become, she's still not a good guy. Right? Not even close. Not in this episode. But it somehow, I think the genius is that with Morgan Elsbeth, I never rooted for Morgan Elsbeth, except for when her family was getting destroyed by Grievous and the Separatist army. That was horrible. But once we get to the 2nd and 3rd episodes, then I stopped kind of empathizing with her. Mm-hmm. Barriss, I don't feel that way at all. I think it's pretty savvy storytelling. And I like the fact that even though Anakin had this massive thing with Barriss that was so pivotal at this point in the story where he is and where she is, it's almost like they don't even register. Like I kept looking at Barriss thinking, does she kind of sense that that's Anakin? She does not. She does not seem to at all, because that is so beneath him now. He's moved on. He's a different person, and she kind of is too. A lot to sort out, but really fascinating stuff.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is... yes.
Indeed.
And of course, I just love talking about it with the 2 of you. You never disappoint, and I'm so glad that we could all talk about this together. on Coffee with Kenobi. Brian, thank you again, my friend. It was such a delight. I would get the good fortune of working with you, but now we get to share the airways with you is so much fun. If people want to continue the conversation with you or reach out, where can they do so?
They can find me on Facebook at Brian DeSutter. That's really the only social media that I use. So that would be the place if they want to reach out to me.
And they can pop in and see you in the CWK Cafe on occasion too.
Yes, they can.
Absolutely. And Tom, the rumor has it that you roll 20s every time you turn on a microphone, and I think you proved that yet again. What's going on with the world of podcasting for you and all the good things you have going on?
Yeah, it's been great. Teachers in the Dungeon is the name of the podcast that I co-host with our friend Dan Ream, and good things happening over there. We're getting ready for Gen Con at the end of the summer and our RPG summer camp, and so we've been talking about a lot of those things on the podcast, as well as we have a monthly series of like creatures and things we've learned about D&D, and then we have a monthly interview session as well. Trying to think who we have coming up soon. We've got Andrew Kaywood of Kaywood Publishing coming on soon. We've got Jim Zub and the team that created the Young Adventurers Guide books. They have a new one coming out. We'll be visiting with them up soon. So yeah, a lot of good stuff and a lot of fun for Dungeons and Dragons there. I always say, Star Wars fans and Dungeons and Dragons kind of go hand in hand. We all started the same, and we're all as popular now as we were back in the 1970s. And it's all storytelling and adventure. So you got that. Let me see where else. You can catch me on my blog, Seeking Positivity in the Galaxy. I've got some things going on there. I have a post coming out recently about my favorite Free Comic Book Day comics that came out recently at the beginning of the month of May, as well as other things, my album playthrough series that I've got going on, and a few other things. So check me out over there, Seeking Positivity in the Galaxy, and I'm on Twitter at Draftline. So catch up with me there for some Star Wars fun.
And if you want to hear me and Tom and Corey talking about all kinds of pop culture and various degrees of serious, then you can certainly be a member of the CWK Alliance, and you'll get access to CWK Pour-Over as well. Well, thank you again both so very much.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me back. And I look forward to seeing both of you tomorrow at school.
Hey.
Indeed. See ya.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here.